My entitled sisters demanded that I let them rent out my vacation home for profit. When I refused, their husbands broke in and are now facing charges. This is going to be really surreal. Welcome to Thread Curious, and let's get to today's story. It all started with a simple message in the family WhatsApp group. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was relaxing at home when my phone vibrated. I opened the app and saw that it was my sister Laura. Laura, hey guys. I have an idea. Why don't we rent out the vacation home? We could make some good money and do something useful with the place. I already knew where this was going. Laura was always having these ideas for how to make easy money, and she usually ended up involving all of us in her endeavors. But the vacation home was a touchy subject. For me, it was a refuge, a place that I had bought with a lot of effort, and that meant much more than just bricks and mortar. I don't think that's a good idea, Laura. This house is a special place to me. I don't want to turn it into a commercial property. My other sister, Julia, quickly chimed in. Julia, but why not? The house sits idle most of the time. We could make some extra money, that would be great. I knew Julia would support Laura. They always came together when they wanted something, especially when they knew I would probably be against it. But this was my house, bought with my hard work, and I wasn't about to give in. I understand your point, but I'd rather the house remain a place of rest for all of us, not an investment. I don't want strangers coming in and out. Laura didn't take long to respond. Laura, you're being selfish. It doesn't hurt to try, and we can split the profits. Everyone wins. It's not about being selfish. It's about respecting something that's mine. I don't want to rent the house out. The silence in the group lasted only a few minutes before Julia started again. Julia, the house is used by all of us. It doesn't make sense for you to decide on your own. We need to talk about this. I was starting to lose my patience. They knew very well that the house was mine, and that I was being generous in allowing everyone to use it whenever they wanted. But to turn this into a question of their right? That was too much. Laura, Julia, let's be clear. The house is mine, I bought it with my own money, and I decide what to do with it. If you want to talk, we can meet, but my decision is made. They were silent for a moment, but it didn't take long for Laura to come up with a new idea. Laura, okay. Let's meet at the vacation home this weekend. We can talk more in person. I knew this wouldn't be just a casual conversation. They were determined to convince me, and I was already mentally preparing myself for another battle. But what I didn't expect was what came next. On Saturday, I arrived at the vacation home early in the afternoon. The place was quiet, as always. I sat on the porch, enjoying the peace of the place, while I waited for them. Laura and Julia arrived together, and to my surprise, they brought their husbands, Marcos and Pedro. As soon as I saw them, my stomach knotted. I knew they were capable of turning a simple argument into something much bigger, especially when it came to supporting their wives. I tried to remain calm, but I already knew that the conversation would not be easy. Laura was the first to speak, with a tone that tried to sound friendly, but that I knew was loaded with intentions. Laura, we thought about it, and we think you should reconsider. It's not fair for you to decide everything alone. Laura, I've already explained my reasons. The house is a special place for me, and I don't want to rent it. Pedro, Julia's husband, decided to butt in. Pedro, but what's the problem? It's just a house. If you don't want to rent it, maybe it's time to think about selling. After all, if we all use it, why should you be the only one who has to pay for it? I was surprised by his audacity. Selling the house. I would never consider that in a million years. I took a deep breath before answering. Pedro, this house is not for sale. I bought it because I wanted to have a place for my family to relax. I don't want to rent it. I don't want to sell it. I just want it to be respected. Laura's husband, Marcos, didn't miss the opportunity to attack. Marcos, but don't you think you're being a little selfish? The house isn't just yours. The whole family has the right to have an opinion. If it was only going to be yours, why would you let us use it? That was too much. They were trying to pressure me, putting all the blame and responsibility on me. I knew they were ganging up on me, but I wasn't going to give in. Me, you're ignoring the fact that it's my house. I allowed you to use it because we're family, but that doesn't give you the right to decide what to do with it. I'm not being selfish, I'm just defending something I've earned through my own efforts. Laura, realizing that her husband's strategy wasn't working, tried a new angle. Laura, no one is trying to take anything away from you. We just think it would be fairer if everyone had a say. We're not asking for much. Me, yes, you are asking. You're asking me to give up what's mine. And I'm not going to do that. The tone of my voice rose, the words began to come out faster, and before I knew it, the situation had turned into a full-blown argument. The husbands were now using almost aggressive arguments, insinuating that I was being ungrateful, that I was disregarding the family. Pedro even suggested that if I wasn't willing to share, they would stop visiting the house and leave me alone, as if that were a threat. I knew I was being attacked from all sides, but I also knew I had to stand my ground. Me, if you think that by threatening or pressuring me you're going to get what you want, you're very wrong. This house is not going to be rented, period. Marcos, impatient and irritated, took a step toward me. Marcos, maybe you need a lesson on how a family works. Here, no one makes decisions alone. If you think you can do that, maybe you should think twice. I didn't back down. I looked him straight in the eye and answered with the same firmness. Me, maybe you should learn to respect boundaries. This house was bought with my work, not yours. And I will protect what is mine, even if you try in every way to intimidate me. There was a moment of tension, where it seemed like things could escalate into something more serious. But before anything could get worse, Julia pulled Marcos back, realizing that he was about to cross a dangerous line. Julia, Marcos, calm down. Let's go. It's not worth it. Laura, seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, tried to end the conversation. Laura, okay, we understand. If that's how you want it, we have nothing more to talk about. But don't think that we're happy about this. I didn't answer. I just looked at them as they drove away, making it clear that my decision was final. They got in the car and drove away, leaving behind a trail of tension and a bitter feeling. I stood there on the porch, feeling the gentle breeze, but with my heart still racing. This wasn't how I wanted things to end, but I knew there was no other choice. Defending what was mine was more important than pleasing others, even if they were my family. In the following days, silence reigned in the family WhatsApp group. No messages, no attempts at reconciliation. I knew it would take time for things to return to normal, if that was even possible. But despite everything, I was at peace with my decision. The vacation home would continue to be the refuge I had dreamed of, and I was determined to protect it, even if it meant facing my own family. But then, I literally had no idea what happened next would happen. They were so shameless. After the confrontation at the vacation home, I hoped that the tension would ease, that things would calm down. But that was just an illusion. In the days that followed, I realized that Laura, Julia, and their husbands were far from accepting my decision. The silence in the WhatsApp group was just the prelude to something much more disturbing. A week after our argument, I went to the vacation home for a relaxing weekend. I needed some time to myself, away from all the family drama. When I arrived, however, I noticed something strange. The front gate, which had always been well kept, was scratched. They were deep scratches, as if someone had driven a key or something sharp against the metal. My heart sank. Who could have done this? I looked around, trying to find any sign of activity, but the place was silent, almost deserted. I entered the house, feeling a growing unease, but found nothing out of place inside. However, the feeling that something was wrong did not leave me. That evening, as I settled into the living room with a cup of tea, I began to reflect on what had happened. The scratches on the gate did not look like random vandalism. Who would do this, and why? I immediately thought of my sisters and their husbands. Could it be that they were trying to scare me, or worse, force me to reconsider my decision not to rent the house? I didn't want to believe that, though. As much as we were at odds, they were my family. They couldn't be so petty as to resort to such tactics, right? But the doubt persisted. The next morning, as I went for a walk, I noticed another detail that made me stop. The small garden in front of the house, which I always kept impeccable, was overturned. The plants were disorganized, some uprooted. Who would do something like that? I could feel my discomfort turning to anger. This situation was getting out of hand. I decided that I would confront Laura and Julia about it, but I wanted to do it calmly, without making rash accusations. Still, the idea that they might be behind this, with the help of their husbands, made me increasingly uneasy. Back in the city, I arranged to meet my sisters at a cafe. I wanted to talk face to face, without intermediaries, without husbands to interfere. When we met, I noticed that they were more reserved than usual, but there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. We need to talk about something serious. I was at the vacation home over the weekend, and I found some damage to the property. Laura and Julia looked at each other, their expressions varying between surprise and curiosity. Julia: damage? What kind of damage? The gate was scratched and the garden was torn up. It didn't look like random vandalism. Do you have any idea who could have done this? Laura frowned, apparently confused. Laura: that's odd. Are you suggesting that it was someone close to us? I hesitated before answering, but I knew I had to be direct. To be honest, I can't ignore the possibility that someone is trying to pressure me into making a decision about the house. Julia's eyes widened, looking offended. Julia: you think it was us? How could you think that? I'm not accusing anyone, but we need to be honest. You know there was tension between us, and these incidents started right after our argument. Laura sighed, crossing her arms. Laura, we wouldn't do something like that. You can rest assured about that. For a moment, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was imagining things, letting the tension cloud my judgment. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the facts. Something was happening, and it didn't seem like a coincidence. Okay, I'll believe you. But please, if you hear anything, let me know. I just want this to be over. We said goodbye, and I went home with conflicting feelings. On the one hand, I wanted to believe them, but on the other, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. In the days that followed, more incidents occurred. Small, but disturbing. One night, I received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was distorted, but the message was clear: you should reconsider your decision about the house. The call was short, and when I tried to return the number, it was blocked. That call was the final straw. Someone was trying to intimidate me, and I had a pretty good idea who it might be. I decided it was time to take action. Unannounced, I went over to Laura's house one night. I knocked on the door, and when she opened it, I couldn't hide my frustration. We need to talk now. Laura was surprised, but she let me in. We sat down in the living room, and I got straight to the point. I got an anonymous call tonight, a threatening one. And it's not the first weird thing that's happened since we had that argument. I want to know once and for all, are you guys involved in this? Laura looked genuinely shocked, but before she could answer, Marcos entered the room. Marcos: what's going on here? I looked at him, feeling anger boiling. It's you, isn't it? Are you behind this? The scratches on the gate, the garden, the phone call. Marcos gave me a wry smile, as if he was finding the situation funny. Marcos: you're paranoid. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't make a fool of me, Marcos. If this continues, I'll go to the police. Laura tried to intervene. Laura, calm down, let's not overreact. I'm sure Marcos wouldn't do anything like that. I stood up, facing Marcos. This is a warning. I won't tolerate any more provocation. If this continues, there will be consequences. I left the house without waiting for an answer, but it was clear that the situation was far from resolved. The following weeks were a game of cat and mouse. I was always on the alert, waiting for their next move. And of course, they didn't disappoint. One day, when I arrived at the vacation home for another weekend, I found the gate scratched again, this time with offensive words. Someone had written "selfish" and "sellout" in large grotesque letters. My patience was at its limit. I contacted a lawyer and informed him of the situation. I wanted to know what my options were if this continued. He suggested that I install security cameras around the property and file a police report, so that I would have everything documented. I took his advice. I discreetly installed the cameras and went to the nearest police station, where I reported the incidents. I knew it wouldn't be easy to prove who was behind it, but at least I would have everything documented in case things got worse. A week later, while I was in town, I received an alert on my phone. It was a notification from the security camera. Someone was in front of the vacation home. When I opened the app, I saw the image of Pedro, Julia's husband, standing next to the gate. He seemed to be looking around, checking to see if anyone was around. I took the footage and saved it as evidence. It was the confirmation I needed. Pedro was involved, and he probably wasn't acting alone. The next day, I arranged another meeting with my sisters, this time at a public restaurant where they couldn't create a scene. When I arrived, Laura, Julia, Marcos, and Pedro were already there, their expressions ranging from curiosity to irritation. I didn't waste any time. I got an alert from the security cameras I installed at the vacation home. Pedro, do you want to explain what you were doing there? Pedro's face turned red, and he looked at Julia, who looked as surprised as I expected her to be. Pedro, I was just checking the place out. I didn't do anything wrong. Checking the place out? After all the incidents that happened, you expect me to believe that? Marcos crossed his arms, looking impatient. Marcos, this is going too far. You're turning this into a war over nothing. You turned this into a war when you decided that my decision wasn't good enough for you. I'm fed up with this situation. I have the evidence I need, and if this continues, I'm going to take this to the police. Laura tried to intervene again, but this time with a more conciliatory tone. Laura, let's all calm down. No one wants this to get worse. Pedro shouldn't have gone there, but he didn't mean any harm. We'll solve this another way. The only way to solve this is if you accept that this house is mine, and mine alone, and that I'll do whatever I want with it. If anything else happens, I'll take legal action. Julia looked like she wanted to say something, but Pedro held her back, probably sensing that the situation was about to get out of hand. Pedro, okay. You win. Don't you want to rent the house? Great. But don't blame us for trying to help the family. I laughed humorlessly. Help the family? Or help yourselves? Let's be honest here. This was never about the family. It was about you trying to control something that was never yours. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone knew I was right, but no one wanted to admit it. After a few moments, Julia finally spoke, her voice low and defeated. Julia, maybe we overreacted, but we don't want to lose contact with you because of this. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension ease a little. I don't want to lose my family either. But this has to end here. If there's one more incident, it'll be the end of the line. We said goodbye without much else to say. The war seemed to be over, but the emotional damage had been done. It would take time for things to return to normal, if that was even possible. Back at the vacation home, I felt a strange relief, mixed with sadness. The place I loved so much now carried memories of conflict and mistrust. But at the same time, I knew I had done the right thing by protecting what was mine. The following months were surprisingly calm. Laura and Julia seemed to have gotten the message, and the relationship between us, although still tense, slowly began to improve. Their husbands, on the other hand, kept their distance, which was honestly a relief. I continued to go to the vacation home, now more vigilant, but with a peace of mind that I was in control. The security cameras became a constant presence, reminding me that I was protected. Little by little, I began to redecorate the place, trying to erase the bad memories and create new, more positive ones. I invited close friends to spend the weekends, organized small get-togethers, and allowed myself to relax again. The house, little by little, became the refuge that it had always been for me. Despite everything, what I learned from this experience was the importance of standing up for what is mine, even if it means facing people close to me. Sometimes, protecting what we have achieved requires courage and determination, especially when those around us do not understand or respect our boundaries. And so, life went on. Over time, the emotional wounds healed, and balance was largely restored. But it would never be the same again. The vacation home remained my special place, but now it also bore the scars of a battle I had fought to protect it. In the end, I came out of this experience stronger, knowing that, no matter how difficult it may be, it is necessary to establish and maintain our boundaries, even with those we love. And, above all, I learned that sometimes the peace we seek only comes after facing the conflicts that challenge us. Dad says no to walking me down the aisle and picks out a new car for his favorite daughter. Let's get straight to the point. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but I soon realized that it would be just another chapter of disappointment in the long story of my relationship with my father. Ever since I was little, I knew I wasn't the favorite child. My sister, always perfect in his eyes, got all the attention, while I was left aside. However, I still hoped that, at least on my wedding day, he would show some kind of affection or support. Dad, I need to tell you something, and I want you to understand. I'm not walking you down the aisle. I was in the middle of the living room, adjusting the suit that would be worn on the big day, when my father walked in and dropped this bombshell. My hand stopped in midair, still holding the tie knot that I was about to adjust. Me. What? What do you mean, you're not walking me down the aisle? You're my father, it should be something natural. Dad, I've thought about it a lot, and I don't think it's something I want to do. Besides, your sister just got a new car for her graduation. I think the money I would have spent on your wedding would have been better spent on this. His words cut like a knife. Not only was he refusing to fulfill his role as a father in my wedding, but he was also making it clear, once again, that my sister was his priority. The feeling of rejection and contempt was almost suffocating. Me. You know what? I don't need you to walk me down the aisle. I don't need anything from you. And in the future, don't come to me for help or anything. This is the end, Dad. My voice was thick with anger and pain. I decided then and there that I would not let him affect me anymore. I had my own life to live, and I would not be guided by the contempt he showed me. The wedding went off without a hitch. I walked down the aisle alone, head held high, determined not to let my father's absence ruin that moment. My mother was present, but she had always been a more neutral figure in our family dynamic, never taking sides. But the resentment was there, latent. My sister, radiant in her expensive dress, arrived at the wedding driving the new car my father had just given her. She seemed delighted, carefree, as if she had no idea how much it hurt me. Me, congratulations on the car, I see you're still the princess of the family. Sister, oh, you know how it is, Daddy has always been generous with me. But what about you? Is everything okay for today? Me. Okay. It's just a shame he didn't have any generosity left for his son. She just shrugged, not really caring. For her, my father's favoritism was something natural, almost an acquired right. After the wedding, our family relationship entered a period of constant tension. My sister, always favored, continued to receive gifts and privileges while I was treated with indifference. My father seemed oblivious to the fact that his actions were driving us further apart. Until, years later, things changed for me. I got a good job, was promoted several times, and in a short time, I was financially stable, more than I could have imagined. Things were going well for me, but the resentment I felt toward my family still ran deep. It was in this context that one day my father suddenly appeared on my doorstep. Dad, I hear you're doing very well right now. You know, times are tough for me and your mother. Your sister is going through some hardships too. I think it's time to give back a little, help your family. His audacity was almost unbelievable. Years of neglect and rejection, and now he expected me to help him financially, as if everything was simply forgotten and forgiven. Me. Are you asking me for money? Dad, I'm asking you to help your family. It's the least you can do, after everything we've been through together. Me. We've been through together? Don't make me laugh. You've always been too busy spoiling your favorite daughter to even notice I existed. Now you expect me to just forget about it all and start handing you money. Dad, That's not fair. I've always done my best for you. Me, no, Dad, you did your best for her. And now, finally, I have something you want. But let me be clear, you won't see a dime from me. The expression on my dad's face changed to something I'd never seen before. A mix of surprise, anger, and maybe even regret, though it was hard to tell for sure. Dad, you're going to regret treating your family like this. Money won't buy you happiness. Me, maybe not, but it will certainly buy peace. Something I never had while I was around you. He left my house without saying anything else. That conversation, however, marked the final turning point in our relationship. After that argument, the relationship with my family became irreparable. My sister tried to get closer a few times, more out of interest than true affection, but I kept her at a distance. Events began to unfold like an uncontrollable spiral of resentment and hostility. Family parties became unbearable, full of tension and disapproving looks. My father made a point of showing how much he despised me, and my sister, always favored, followed his example, treating me with condescension. Sister, do you really think you did the right thing? Refusing to help the family? That will haunt you. Me, I did what I had to do to protect myself. If you can't understand that, that's your problem, not mine. The fights and disagreements became constant. My mother, always the peacemaker, tried to intervene, but to no avail. The division in the family was deep and seemed irreparable. Over time, I began to withdraw from my family completely. The constant pressure, resentment, and feeling of being constantly ignored became unbearable. I began to avoid family gatherings, blocked phone numbers, and isolated myself. During this time, I began to reflect on my life and the choices I had made. Although I was financially stable, the loneliness and emptiness I felt were overwhelming. I had no real connection with anyone in my family, and this began to take its toll. Years later, after a long time of no contact, I received a letter from my father. He was ill, and the words he wrote were full of regret. Letter from Father. I know I wronged you. I know I was unfair and that I treated you in a way that no one should be treated. I wish I could take it back, but I know that is not possible. I am writing to tell you that despite everything, I love you, and I hope that one day you can forgive me. The words hit me hard. I didn't know how to respond. The anger and resentment were still there, but there was something else, a small part of me that wanted to believe that perhaps some kind of reconciliation was possible. After much reflection, I decided to visit my father in the hospital. The sight of him, weak and vulnerable, was a shock. He was no longer the imposing man who had always controlled my life. Now he seemed fragile, almost remorseful. Father, I know it is too late to change things, but I wanted you to know that I regret everything. How I treated you, how I neglected you in favor of your sister. I never wanted things to end this way. Me. Dad, I can't say that all is forgiven. There's still a lot of pain, a lot of resentment. But I appreciate you acknowledging your mistakes. That's a start. That conversation was the beginning of something new. There wasn't a complete reconciliation, but for the first time in years, there was an understanding between us. He passed away a few weeks later, and with his death, some of my resentment went away too. Over time, I began to rebuild myself. My relationship with my sister never went back to what it was, but I was able to find some peace in my life. There was no longer active enmity, just a calm acceptance of the past and a desire to move forward. My father's legacy was complex, but it also taught me valuable lessons. About what really matters in life, about the value of forgiveness, and about the importance of fighting for what you believe is right, even if it means cutting ties with those who should love you. My ex-wife cheated on me with my golden son brother and got pregnant. Now my parents want me to take charge of a child that isn't even mine. Without further ado, let's get to the point. The living room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock hanging on the wall. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the phone in my hands, still processing what I had just discovered. The news hit me like a punch in the gut. My ex-wife, the woman I had shared years of my life with, had cheated on me with my own brother. Worse still, she was pregnant, and the child wasn't mine. My thoughts were in chaos. How could they do this to me? And, more importantly, how was I going to tell my parents? The feeling of betrayal mixed with the anguish of having to deal with their reaction. I knew that my mother and father had always had a soft spot for my brother, the golden son of the family. If they knew the truth, everything would change. But before I could decide what to do, my phone rang. Mom. Son, we need to talk. It's about Amanda. Her tone was serious, almost accusatory. I knew in that instant that things were about to get much worse. Me. What's wrong, Mom? Did something happen? She took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for a difficult conversation. Mom, I heard you and Amanda broke up. But what I don't understand is how you could abandon her at this time, especially now that she's pregnant. My heart sank, and anger began to rise. She had no idea what the truth was. Me. You really don't know what happened, Mom. Mom, what I do know is that you have a responsibility to take care of this child. You can't just run away from your duties just because things got tough. She kept talking, insisting that I should reconsider and go back to Amanda, to face up to my responsibilities. But with every word she said, it became clearer that the conversation was heading in an unbearable direction. I decided to interrupt before she could continue. Me. Mom, stop. You don't understand. The child Amanda is carrying is not mine. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. Mom. What are you saying? Me. I'm saying Amanda cheated on me. And guess who? With your golden son. Yes, Mom, the baby is my brother's, not mine. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't long before my parents showed up at my house. The door had barely closed behind them before my mom began speaking, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Mom, that can't be true. There must be some mistake. I held on tight, refusing to back down. I knew the truth was hard to swallow, but they needed to hear it. Me. I wish it was a mistake, Mom. But I saw the messages, I saw them together. Amanda and my brother had been having an affair for months before I found out. My father, who had been silent until then, crossed his arms, frowning in disbelief. Dad, and you're sure about that? Couldn't it be some kind of setup? Something you misinterpreted? I shook my head, already anticipating his answer. Me. I wish it was. But the evidence is all there. You can ask them if you want. But I already know the truth. My mother sat down heavily in the nearest chair, looking stunned. Mom, but what about the baby? How can you be so sure it's your brother's? Me. Amanda confirmed it herself. She had no choice after I confronted her. The impact of the revelation left the room silent. My mother looked lost, while my father began to digest what he had just heard. Dad, that changes everything then. But what do we do now? I knew that the decision they made at that moment would be crucial to the future of our family. The question was whether they would stand by the truth or continue to deny reality. Me. I'm not going to take responsibility for this child. I'm not going to take responsibility for something that isn't mine, and I'm definitely not going to continue to pretend that nothing happened. My dad took a deep breath, as if trying to take it all in. But my mom, always the protector of the family balance, was still struggling to accept it. Mom, but what about your brother? Are you just going to cut him out of your life? Me. He did it first, didn't he? He knew what he was doing and still chose to betray me. That's not a person I want in my life. The moral dilemma I had posed was clear. Now the choice was in my parents' hands. They could continue to protect their favorite son or accept reality and try to fix what was left of our family. The days that followed were tense. My parents, always used to resolving family problems with calm and diplomatic conversations, were now facing a conflict that seemed impossible to resolve. I decided it was time to confront my brother, face to face. I arrived at my parents' house late in the afternoon, knowing he would be there. When I walked in, I found my brother sitting on the couch, as if he had been waiting for me. There was a look of defiance in his eyes, as if he had already prepared for the confrontation. Me. We have to talk. He simply nodded, as if he already knew what I was going to say. My parents stood nearby, watching in silence. Me. So you have nothing to say about what you did? Nothing to say to the person you called your brother? My brother shrugged, a cynical smile on his lips. Brother, what do you want me to say? That I'm sorry. That it was a mistake? It won't change anything. The lack of remorse in his voice only increased my anger. I approached him, trying to remain calm. Me. You destroyed what was left of our family. You betrayed the trust one had in you and still expect everything to go back to normal. He crossed his arms, as if trying to shield himself from my words. Brother, you always thought you were better than me. You were always the perfect son in our parents' eyes. Maybe I just wanted to prove that you're not so perfect after all. The revelation of his motivation was a hard blow. I had never realized how much resentment he held. But that didn't justify what he had done. Me, if that's what you wanted, congratulations. You've proven that I'm not perfect. But that won't change what you did. And it certainly won't change the fact that you destroyed our relationship. My parents were still silent, but I could feel the tension rising in the room. They were facing the reality that their family was broken, and there was no easy solution. Dad, that's enough. We need to work this out in a civilized manner. My mom, still trying to keep the peace, tried to intervene. Mom, maybe it's best if we take a break. You each need space to process all of this. But I knew that time wouldn't heal this wound. I had to make a decision, and I knew that decision would shape the future of our family. Me. I can't keep pretending like nothing happened. Maybe one day I'll forgive you, but not now. And I'm definitely not taking responsibility for this child. You can do whatever you want, but I'm out. I left the room, knowing that I had done what needed to be done. My relationship with my family was broken, and I wasn't sure it would ever be repaired. But at least now the truth was out in the open, and everyone had to deal with the consequences. Over the next few months, the rift between me and my family grew even wider. My relationship with my parents became distant, with conversations rare and fraught with tension. They were clearly torn, trying to balance their love for both children but unable to ignore the betrayal. My parents continued to insist that I reconsider my decision to walk away, using every excuse they could think of. Mom, son, your dad and I are worried. We can't just pretend that you're not part of this family. All of this, it's painful, but we're a family. We can't let this destroy us. I looked at my mom, feeling a mixture of sadness and frustration. She still didn't fully understand the depth of the betrayal, or maybe she was just refusing to accept the gravity of the situation. Me, Mom, I understand that you want everything to go back to normal, but it can't. Not after what happened. You can try to put the pieces back together, but for me, these pieces don't fit together anymore. My father, who had remained silent, finally spoke, his voice heavy with a grave tone. Dad, so what do you intend to do then? Are you going to keep pushing us apart? Are you going to live alone, without your family? I had thought about it many times. The idea of distancing myself completely seemed more appealing every day. Loneliness had been a part of my life for so long that it didn't seem as terrible as the constant reminder of betrayal. Me. I don't know. But I know I can't go on like this. Maybe the best thing is to take a break, to distance myself, to find my own way. My mother looked at my father, trying to find support, but he seemed as lost as she was. They didn't want to lose me, but they also didn't know how to keep the family together in the face of everything that had happened. Mom, please, son, don't do this. We've already lost so much. Don't make us lose you too. There was pain in her voice, and for a moment, I almost gave in. But then I remembered all the pain this situation had caused, the sleepless nights, the constant anguish. I knew that in order to find peace, I needed to walk away. Me. I'm sorry, Mom. I need some time. I need to find myself again. She didn't say anything else, just nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I knew my decision was made, and there was nothing she could say to change my mind. I decided that the best way to move on was to distance myself completely. I moved to a new city, changed my phone number, and started a new life where no one knew my past. I found a new job, made new friends, and slowly began to rebuild my life. Distance brought me the peace I had been searching for. Without the constant reminder of the betrayal, I was able to focus on myself, my ambitions, and what really mattered. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life. But inevitably, the shadow of the past came back to haunt me. I received a letter from my parents, begging me to come home. They said my brother had spiraled into self-destruction, my ex-wife was struggling to raise their son alone, and the family was more disunited than ever. I knew they were trying to guilt-trip me, that they wanted to manipulate me into coming back. But something inside me had already changed. I was no longer the person they could control with emotional blackmail. Me, to myself. I can't go back. Not after everything that's happened. They need to deal with the consequences of their actions, just as I'm dealing with mine. I tore up the letter, determined to move on with my life without looking back. A few years passed, and my new life was blossoming. I had achieved the success I had always wanted, I was financially stable, and I was surrounded by people who truly cared about me. However, the ghost of my past never completely disappeared. One day, while walking through the park, I saw someone I never expected to see there. My brother. He was sitting on a bench, alone, with an expression of regret and sadness. I could have ignored him and moved on, but something made me stop. Me. What are you doing here? He looked up, surprised to see me. There was a mix of emotions on his face. Embarrassment, guilt, and maybe even a little relief. Brother, I was waiting for you to show up. I heard you moved here. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was still furious, but another part, the one that had matured over the years, felt sorry for him. Me. Why? For what, exactly? He lowered his head, unable to look me in the eye. Brother, I made a lot of mistakes. And I'm paying for them every day. I lost my family, my life has become hell. I just wanted to apologize to you. His words were unexpected. For years, I had imagined this moment, but I never thought he would actually apologize. Me. Apologies won't change what happened. He nodded in agreement. Brother, I know. But I needed to say it. I needed you to know that I deeply regret it. Looking at him, I realized he meant it. The anger I had been carrying for so long began to fade, replaced by a sense of weariness. I had carried this burden for too long. Me. I don't know if I can ever forgive you completely. But I think I can try to move on for real now. He nodded, looking relieved that he had finally spoken what was in his heart. Brother, I understand. I just wanted you to know that no matter what happens, you will always be my brother. Those words, although simple, carried a weight that I was not ready to deal with at that moment. But I knew that I had taken the first step towards healing. After that encounter, I returned home with my mind full of thoughts. My brother had taken a step towards redemption, but that did not mean that everything was forgiven or forgotten. I still needed to process everything, still needed to continue my healing journey. However, this unexpected encounter made me realize something important. Forgiveness, even partial, is a process that benefits the one who forgives more than the one who is forgiven. I was slowly freeing myself from the chains of the past. I decided to continue living my life, keeping the necessary distance from my family, but without letting resentment consume me. After all, life is too short to be wasted on hatred and resentment. Over time, I learned to find peace in the little things, in the friends I made, the accomplishments I achieved, and the peace I finally found in my own company. I knew the past would always be a part of me, but it no longer had to define my future. And so, I moved forward, ready to face whatever life had in store for me, without the shadows of the past holding me back. And that's all for today, so far. Stay tuned for more updates. See you in the next video. Bye.